Welcome to the AlmighTees channel. In this week's episode is part 4 of the multi-part series, My Journey into and Through the Screen Printing Industry. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 3, I recommend you go to our playlist on our channel, or all 3 of those videos are linked in the description. Come along as I continue through my journey. We're going to talk about that next. America's Best was the company that I worked for next. They were located in Columbia, South Carolina. Little did I know it at the time when I started, but America's Best was more than just a screen printing company. They actually were a manufacturing company, an apparel manufacturing business. They had a sewing plant in Lancaster, the print shop in Columbia, and then a home office in Greenville, South Carolina. Equipment-wise, America's Best, when I started, had 4 automatics, 2 M&R Challengers, and 2 American electric presses, and 1 manual. Now, they did upgrade later on and added another manual and I think a 12-color Challenger. The main client that we printed for at America's Best was a soccer company called Umbro. Maybe some of you will remember the company that manufactured apparel, cleats, shorts, shin guards, soccer balls. Well, we were responsible for printing the crux of all of their screen printed t-shirts. And since they were also a manufacturer of apparel, I'm pretty sure, but don't hold me to this, I'm pretty sure that they were also manufacturing apparel for Umbro and Reebok at the time. So one of the really neat things when I was working there was, since they already had an in with Reebok wanted to tap into some of that soccer apparel. So they had contacted the higher ups at America's Best and said, why don't y'all create some designs, some soccer themed designs. Let's have a meeting and let's talk about it and see if we can't work something out. So I was tasked with the responsibility of coming up with some of these new designs, since we had been not really creating designs for Umbro. They had all of their designs pre-created, and then they would just send the art to us and we would sep it and then also burn it and produce it. So we did have a familiarity with what Umbro had been producing, so we started creating some designs. We were able to take those designs, print them onto apparel, and then they went up and met with wherever Reebok was at the time and met with some of the higher ups in that division, and they came back with some really good news that the people that were in over that division were really thrilled with a lot of the designs and the printing and the quality of the shirts. And it all sounded very promising, but for some unknown reason, I never knew why, it kind of never materialized. So at this time, it's probably the early to mid 90s, Apple Macintosh still led the way when it came to computer graphics and art departments. But the next thing that I eventually ended up getting introduced to was the laser printer and vellum, is how we used to produce our separations. And for those of you that may or may not know, that laser printers have a fuser assembly and heat is involved to actually bind the toner to the vellum, and the vellum being a more unstable media, it made separations very, very challenging, because the vellum would contract and expand in different rates per sheet. So it wasn't just something that you could just print out your separations, take them to the screen room, and have your screen department produce the screens. I had to thoroughly tape all of my separations down on a light table, and with a fine-tooth comb go through and make sure it lined up, and if it didn't line up, it was my responsibility to make sure it did. One of the other things that I was introduced to at America's Best was all this freehand. Previously, I had learned how to do computer graphics, or at least vector graphics, through Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop, but I was now being introduced to all this freehand, which eventually ended up being bought out by Macromedia, and it was Macromedia for a little while, but then Adobe kind of bought Macromedia and then integrated it all. But it was pretty seamless. I mean, I had familiarity with a vector-based program like Illustrator, so learning new tools and ways of doing things in all this freehand was, you know, a learning curve, but was something that I was fairly familiar with. Here's an interesting tidbit when I worked at America's Best, was we had an opportunity to print for Hootie and the Blowfish. And for those of you that don't know or aren't real familiar with Hootie, they were a pop rock band out of Columbia, South Carolina. And at the time, they were bigger than big. They were larger than large, and they were all over the place. So we were really excited to be able to work and to have some of our hometown boys Hootie's shirts in the shop and producing for our guys in Columbia. Along with printing for Hootie is there's a connection that is going to come in one of my following videos. So y'all keep watching these videos. There's a lot of these little connections that I find interesting, and I hope you do too. Another interesting tidbit was Umbro was printing these sleeve-to-sleeve prints across the back of the t-shirts and across the sleeve seams. They had this one press that was outfitted just for this type of printing, and they were like, I don't remember how large the squeegees and the screens were. I mean, even if it was a 12 color press, it was specially fitted for these wider screens, these wider flood bars and squeegees, and these specialized palettes to be able to do these really, really wide prints on the backs of these Umbro shirts. And I thought it was neat because of the fact that usually when you're printing over seams, the ink or the ink industry standard is water-based, but this wasn't water-based. We were printing plastisol. We were printing on darks, print flash printing with Union Max Opaque inks. So there was quite an interesting time in my life to see something like that. I've never worked for a company since that did anything that large, because everything was, you know, extra wide, just to be able to go sleeve to sleeve. I'd worked at America's Best approximately 93 to 97, so for about 4 years. And the times later in my time working for America's Best, I can remember there being an issue with Umbro, and Umbro was kind of telling the owners at America's Best that you need to start trying to find some other customers, and that they were going to begin to start pulling out. And I don't know if there was just a downturn in the industry as far as soccer related apparel, but they were, you know, trying to get them to, you know, get ahead of the game, that they were going to be eventually exiting. And so there was a scramble. I can remember there was a scramble to try to get, fill these voids that Umbro was going to leave. Unfortunately, what ended up turning into what is known as the North American Free Trade Agreement, and that's trade between Canada, United States, and Mexico. There were some changes to that agreement between those three countries, and I think what it ended up doing was it ended up opening the door for a company like Umbro to start taking, or at least getting their shirts manufactured and printed in a country like Mexico, where labor was far, far under what American wages were at the time. So I ended up losing my job. They were going to end up shutting down America's Best. They kept me on, fortunately, because I could do so many different things, and they needed somebody there to answer the phone and just to handle, you know, shipments, UPS, things like that. What ended up happening is they were going to start liquidating some of the equipment. They were going to start liquidating some of the apparel, because we had two other buildings at America's Best that were warehouses for some of the apparel that they had manufactured. Well, what I didn't know at the time, but one of the owners was planning on buying some of that equipment, and we moved into another building right next door to where this print building was, a smaller building. We had he bought an automatic and a manual and the dryer, and we started producing shirts and designs under the name of Green Apple Graphics. Green Apple Graphics eventually got sold to another custom screen printing company in Columbia by the name of AlmighTees. The owner of AlmighTees didn't have a whole lot of screen printing industry experience. He was basically a business owner, and that made it difficult for me to just deal with. And I had decided that it would probably be in my best interest after a short time to leave and to try to find my way into another job. And I was actually going to start doing freelance computer graphics. Well, when I went in to get my last check at AlmighTees, the owner at the time and my manager had clued me into another job that was in Columbia, downtown Columbia, for a local screen printing company that was looking for nothing other than an artist, a computer-aided graphic artist. And so that is where this episode is going to end, and I want to see you in the next episode, because we're going to go into part 5 of my journey into and through the screen printing industry. So if you haven't, would you like this video? And would you consider subscribing to the channel? And if you do, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be alerted whenever we upload new content. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.